Okay, so an introduction to Sonocent Audio Notetaker. Just before I demonstrate the software itself, I think it's really useful to spend some time to establish the context of the software. Audio Notetaker is a software tool which was designed to help students take notes, predominantly in lectures and classes, although is becoming a tool which is useful for taking notes and studying in other contexts as well. Firstly, I'd like to begin with a quote from Confucius, who lived a very long time ago. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Hopefully you will be able to relate to that in the sense that when you just hear something once, it's very difficult to remember it. But seeing, using multiple senses, those memories it's easier to form memories. And finally, the actual application of that knowledge brings on a new understanding. And I think this is really important for note-taking. And this is a hint at the importance of note-taking in how it shapes how we learn. So note-taking is really important. Firstly, because it's the primary method of instruction in classrooms and university lecture halls. Secondly, because the research shows it. It's recognized that note-taking is a highly complex task, placing more burden on memory and processing skills than playing chess. So it's a difficult process. And because of that, students are only able to capture between 20% and 40% of the important points. That's not much if you consider that students are going to these classes and lectures to gain information, and it's essentially a point of knowledge transfer. But students are only able to capture a small proportion of that information, and the rest is just going forgotten. However, research into note-taking has identified that while creating and reviewing good notes from lectures is related to a student's performance in tests. So not only is note-taking difficult, but actually good note-taking improves a student's scores. And this is because the process of note-taking is actually an important component to learning. And I've tried to put this into a diagram. So firstly, you start off with the information, and information can be from any source. In the context of how we're talking today, it's from a class or a lecture, but that information could be from a textbook, could be from a discussion. It's just a source of information. And then in order to capture that information, you write notes in order to be able to remember that or come back to that information again later. And then from the notes, you need to learn it. You need to have that knowledge available to you in your brain. So I've written brain. And then finally, you need to apply that knowledge, and that's your exam or assignment. So you have your source, you have the capture of that information, you have the memory, and then you have finally the output. And coming back to that Confucius quote, and another quote indeed that is really useful to remember is, where is the learning? And in the education context, you have to constantly be asking yourself, where is the learning? And I would argue that the learning is happening in all stages of this process. So when you're taking down your notes and you're capturing it, there's learning. When you're reviewing your notes and you're coming back and you're revising, you're learning. And finally, when you apply that knowledge, then you're learning as well. And often they say the best form of learning is instructions. And notes can be from any source as well. So a textbook, a web page, a conversation with a tutor, or even a lecture. So I've just talked about learning and that note-taking is part of the learning process. But there is a problem with note-taking, especially from classes and lectures. And in order to fully realize what this problem is, I think it's useful to have a look and reflect on how you take notes from a text-based source, and this is quite different. In a text-based source, you're in a different scenario, and I'm just going to go through how this is different. So when you're note-taking in lectures, you can't pause the lecture, rewind, then replay, or go over something you haven't understood, whereas when you're note-taking from a text-based source, it's very easy to stop and read something again if you need to. And there's this problem of not being able to really delve deep into the information and to reflect on it and take the time to do that. That's an issue with note-taking from lectures. You kind of have to try to capture down as much as you can whilst you're in class, and that doesn't lead to the best notes. Secondly, if you're reminded of some information you want to look up, you have to make a note and remember to follow it up later. Whereas when you're reading, if you're reminded of some information you want to look up, you may be able to do it straight away. And then you can't slow down the lecture if you fall behind with your note-taking, or if the lecturer is speaking too fast for you to really understand or process what's being said. Whereas with a text-based source, you can read and make notes at the pace that's best for you and make sure your notes are complete. And of course, there are advantages to attending or hearing an oral explanation. I think that's the reason why lectures and classes are still the primary form of instruction, because for hundreds of thousands of years, humans have communicated through talking to each other and transferred ideas and knowledge through stories or through other verbal communication. And we engage with stories and we engage with someone speaking to us, and it's much easier often to understand things, especially complex ideas. However, it has all these disadvantages when it comes to note-taking. And perhaps it's good to consider how you would take notes from a text-based source. You may read it with a highlighter pen in hand, go through, highlight those key phrases as you're listening to it. Then once you've read it all and you've understood it all for context, you can go back to each of those points and then reflect, make sure you've understood it, and then put those key points into your own words, summarize them, and then that becomes your notes. And I think that is actually the optimum way of taking notes, because you're making sure that you can engage with the material, but the note-taking process itself is not inhibiting the initial comprehension. And then, of course, what about students with disabilities? And note-taking is difficult enough as it is, but then if you have a disability, or maybe you just struggle with that process for whatever reason, then that's almost like a burden that the student is carrying on top of the initial difficulty anyway. And that could be anything. It could be poor spelling, the sheer volume of lectures and the intensity of them. It could be memory issues. Maybe you struggle with short-term memory or auditory processing, or it could be concentration difficulties or organization problems. Maybe your study technique isn't quite up there. There's numerous reasons why you may struggle with this process because it's so difficult. So in summary of this introductory context-setting part, I think a good note-taking solution will be able to accurately capture the information from a lecture, that first part of capturing the information. And of course, today, the information isn't necessarily just contained within what the person's saying, but they may have a multimedia presentation, such as a PowerPoint slide, or maybe they show a video or reference a web page, and that needs to be captured as well somehow within the notes. Secondly, a good note-taking solution will allow students to engage with the material, deepen comprehension, and transfer the content to their long-term memory. That kind of notes, information to notes and notes to brain section is a key component of where the learning happens. And then finally, I think it should be accessible. Any solution that's worth considering should be accessible to any student, or the majority of students. You shouldn't really force a very difficult or impractical technique upon that student. So the main event showing Audio Notetaker, and we strongly believe, I mean, we created the software to solve all these problems, and we strongly believe that it does. So here is an example of what a file may look like once you're done with an Audio Notetaker. And initially it may look like quite a lot to take in all at once, but actually the note-taking process within Audio Notetaker is really simple. And Audio Notetaker is great because you're combining various sources of information all into a single workspace. So rather than talk you through what this is, I'm just going to go through the process a student may use to create notes within Audio Notetaker. So firstly, they would open up a new tab and hit record. And what's unique about Audio Notetaker is that we visualize the speech from the recording. So you will notice every time I take a pause, which is normally at the end of a phrase or a concept, Audio Notetaker creates a new one of these chunks. And this chunking of information actually makes accessing the audio very, very easy. So when you're moving through your audio afterwards, you can just move phrase by phrase using the arrow keys, or I could click on an individual chunk. However, I believe the most important thing that this visualization allows is the ability to color code the speech. So the best way of describing this is the highlighter pen, but for the speech in your lecture. You're going through and you're color coding the important parts, except it may not be just the important parts. So on the right hand side, we have the ability to add a color key over here. And so you can label what those colors mean. So red is important, but perhaps I don't understand something. And so I want to annotate in my lecture, I don't understand this. So when I come back to it, I know I need to listen over it again. And we have various color keys, and you can also create your own using the edit color key function. Also, you may not know that something's important until partway through. And it's very easy to go back and select these chunks and then highlight them and mark them and say, actually, all of this was important. And this brings into play one of the key features of Audio Notetaker, is that it allows you to go back and create notes outside of the lecture. So here I was annotating retrospectively, but in fact my whole note-taking process doesn't have to be done at the same time, although often it's efficient to do that. So secondly, what I can do is I can break up this recording into sections. And these are similar to paragraphs, and you may do this in numerous ways. You may want to just contain like pieces of information together in bite-sized chunks, so you're only processing small amounts at a time. But what's really useful is if you do have access to those presentation slides, is to import those alongside. And you do not need to import them before, you can import them afterwards, but if you do import them beforehand and you have access to them beforehand, when you create a new one of these sections, all it does is move the audio to the next slide. And what we've done in Audio Notetaker is try to make this process as streamlined and easy as possible. So it is possible to do your color highlighting by clicking on these colors. But you'll notice that there's a number next to each of these, and those relate to an individual button on your keyboard that you need to press to mark that audio. So for example, if I wanted to color it blue, I just press the number 2, and I can use the arrow key to go back and just press 2 in order to color those chunks that have gone past. The same color again, or 0, will turn it back to the normal color. Likewise, I can press enter in order to move this audio along to the next section. I can also press the insert section break button up here. So it's very simple to go through this process. It just requires single button presses, either a number or enter. For some students, they may want to be able to type notes as well at the same time. Maybe they do function well listening and also typing their thoughts at the same time. And for those students, it's very easy to type notes. You just start typing and it will automatically get entered. And then you just have to press enter to return back to your audio in order to press the numbers to do the coloring. And what I do personally is I use this to type questions to myself. So I use the color highlighting to highlight the information, but if I have any thoughts or queries that I don't want to forget, then I can just type those in alongside and then come back to them later. But in essence, Audio Notetaker is a tool that can be used in numerous different ways, and it's for the student to find out how they want to use it and what suits them best. And sometimes just concentrating and listening is much better than trying to do too many things at once and take down too much information. Of course, the student can always come back later to do that. So finally, in terms of the note-taking process, it's possible to color the background of these sections. And you may want to do that if you want to group together like themes, or potentially you've just switched off and you think, oh no, I just want to come back to this entire section again because I have no idea what was said. So you've got those two layers of color annotations. So that's the note-taking process, or at least that's the capture and annotation process. Then the idea is that the student, after class, would come back and they'd revisit their color annotations. And they'd go through and they'd re-listen to each one, and that's when they try to summarize the information, and that's the note-taking process. And we have numerous things within the software to make that process easier. So firstly, it's possible to slow down the speed of playback, and that does not affect the pitch of the voice. We also have noise cancellation, so it's easier to listen, and we also have a pause mode, which was designed to aid this process of transcribing. And what it does is it will play back but only pause at the end. It will play back but pause at the end of each one of these chunks. It's that we visualize the speech from the recording. So you'll notice that the cursor moved and then it stopped at the end of that chunk. And this means students are only getting small pieces of information at any one time. And they can either type up that information, or they could use something like Dragon Naturally Speaking to dictate that information into the text pane. Or indeed, they could just listen to it all and then record their own voice doing a summary and just color that chunk a different color. It just depends on whether someone's an auditory learner or a text-based learner or a visual learner. So that's the typing up of notes. We do actually have two spaces to write things down. We have something called the text pane, which the idea is that's where you type your notes from your audio. We also have the reference pane, and this is where you can add supplementary information which is relevant to the class you're taking. So it could be a definition of a word that was used in your class which you didn't know previously. It could be a link to a web page or a video that you want to store in this file, so you can quickly click on it to access it later. But one other thing you can do is you can access the information from your slides by going copy text from slides, which is just down here. And this means a student can now use this information without having to type it up again themselves. And what's really useful for some students is you can also get the software to read out
the world's most important 6-second drum sample and what it tells us about copyright law today.
So that's a really useful feature for some students. Other things that the student may want to do, maybe they don't want their entire lecture anymore. Maybe they just want to extract certain parts, and it could be the pink, which is their own voice, or it could just be those important parts. And they just select the colors that they want. They can either extract into a currently open file or a new document and click OK, and this will pull out that information into a new file. Actually, it would be probably best if there was more than one section. Hang on, let me just color this and pull that out. And they can pull that information out into a new file. And now they've just got the important parts, but that's not all. Maybe they don't want to have to review their notes on their computer. Maybe what they want to do is then export that information. So you can also export that notes file as an album to iTunes. What the software does is it creates a music album from your notes file. Each of these sections will become a new track. The images here gets embedded as album art into each of the tracks. The metadata up here, which is useful for organizing, such as the speaker and the title of the notes file, goes in as artist and album information. And then your text gets embedded as lyrics data as well. So a student can then export that to any device which plays music, an iPod, iPhone, an MP3 player, and listen to the notes when they're on the bus or walking around, or at a time that's convenient for them. And of course, it's not the whole lecture, it's just the important parts which they've identified. You'll notice other export options include the text and images, and also export as a video. So you can also export as a video, which has a slide and then the audio playing over the top. I talked about recording straight into the software through a microphone. The truth is, in Audio Notetaker, you have numerous options for recording. You can record on any device and then import the audio file in afterwards. You can also soon, hopefully, probably April or May time, will be releasing an iOS app which allows you to record, do all your color annotations, organize your audio into sections, add your notes, tag your notes as well, all from your iOS device. It's going to be a free companion app. And then a student can use whatever's in their pocket or an iPad to capture their information. And one more way of recording is to record not what's coming in through your microphone, but what's coming out through your computer speakers. We call this output recording. And this is useful when a student wants to record a video. And today, not all instruction is given in a classroom or a lecture. Sometimes through the flipped classroom, or maybe just a video resource, students have to watch videos and watch things through their computer. And if I have this option selected, then when I hit record, it's going to record the sound that's coming through my computer, and Audio Notetaker grabs it just before it comes out of the speakers. And that, combined with a screen capture utility that allows students to grab stills from their computer, means that they can actually take notes through the same process from videos that they're watching on the computer. So you really do have all your notes from different sources in one place. Furthermore, I've talked about importing PowerPoint presentations, but you can also import PDF documents and image files as well. So it's possible to also do your note-taking from a written source, such as a journal article, in the software. The final thing to mention is organization. And you'll note I've talked about the fact you can tag your notes. Through those tags, you can relist your notes files, and it'll put it under headings, so it's easy to come back to a class again later. And you can also do keyword searches through your files, and that will search through the PowerPoint presentation and also the notes files as well. And this means that when you're trying to find a piece of information again, it's very easy just to do a keyword search and go not only back to the right file, but also the exact slide where that was talked about. So that's a very basic overview of Audio Notetaker and how it works, and I hope you can appreciate what this approach to note-taking achieves. A student can go in, they can capture the information from a class very easily, annotate it in a similar way they may go through the highlighter pen, and then in their own time come back and take their notes. And that's going to achieve very good notes, but also means that a student can work at the pace that suits them. And of course, Audio Notetaker combines lots of pieces of information together, so they have that all in one place. So I'm just going to come to the questions part of the presentation and answer your questions. Okay, I've got a list of questions here. Firstly is concerning the quality of the recording. That is all down to hardware. We have features such as increasing the volume and noise cancellation, which will help to a point. Within our iOS app, we've gone to great lengths in order to improve that quality as well, and we're quite happy with it. But of course, it's going to come down to the hardware you're using. So many computers these days come with inbuilt microphones. If you have a Mac or a high-spec laptop, then that microphone is probably going to be quite good. If you don't, then you may want to use an external microphone, and you can get a USB microphone for about £40 or $40. We often recommend the Sonocent Go mic because it's low cost and also directional, and that's excellent quality. Secondly, export. Can the audio be saved as MP3s? That is what I talked about, album to iTunes. You can also just select audio and export it as well. What Audio Notetaker does that's quite clever is it never compresses or decompresses audio. And what this means is it can work with hours and hours of audio on very low spec machines because the processing that's going on is minimal. But it does mean that any file you import, when you export, it's saved as the same file type. In terms of export options, you can't export as MP3, but you can then export as AAC, which is a very common file type. And finally, we had a question about linking the audio to the text. So when you type, there's a way of seeing when you type that. This is an incredibly difficult problem for us to solve because of the way that Audio Notetaker makes it very easy to manipulate the audio. So what I didn't show you, which I should have, is these chunks are completely fully editable. So I can move them about, I can move them to a completely different section if I want, or I can delete them. And this raises questions about if I type something and then I move the audio, does the text move as well? If I delete that audio, does the text get deleted? And there's lots of user interface issues which are really difficult to deal with. So we do aim to solve these issues because we realize that it would be a very useful feature for people, and in the near future we will be adding some functionality to help with that. But for the time being, I suggest that when you type something, you simply link the text and the audio using color, and it's very easy to color the text as well. We do have one more question. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so our final question is relating to the playback of both the speech and the audio. I referred to the slowdown feature up here, and this is just for the audio. If you want to control the text-to-speech, what we do is we just plug into the text-to-speech that's actually built into the operating system on the PC and the Mac. We do have a button here for speech settings that allow you to control that. So within that menu, you can control whether it's slower or faster, and also what voices you use. Microsoft comes with a default voice, but you can install other voices and utilize those as well. So hopefully that covered everyone's questions. We do have a 30-day free trial that anyone can download and use. Once that trial is expired, then you can still view files as well within the software. The software is available to purchase online as well. And we have various license types as well. So if you're interested in volume licensing, then you should definitely get in touch and ask us about those. The software is available for PC and Mac. The version I showed you today was version 3.1 for the PC. The Mac version's on 2.8 at the moment, so it's missing some of the features from this version, but all files are compatible. And you can go to our website as well in order to find out about those differences. We do our very best to support users. So within the software we have a tutorial that's built in, that's a file that users can work through. We have a welcome video that shows all the features of the software. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Audio Notetaker, which is full of videos, both videos to help explain the software and also to explain individual features, as well as some testimonials from users as well. And finally, we also have a very comprehensive knowledge base, which should have an article on pretty much anything you want to find out. And you can access that through the support part of our website. So if you have any questions at all, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. And hopefully this has shown you exactly what Audio Notetaker is and how it's such a powerful solution for students. We do have a number of webinars planned for the next 2 months on topics ranging from how can Audio Notetaker help people with special needs, to an introduction to our new iOS companion app. So please visit our blogs page for that schedule if you're interested in finding out more about different usages of Audio Notetaker. As I alluded to at the start of the presentation, Audio Notetaker was designed as a tool for taking notes in classes and lectures, but actually people are using it for a wide variety of study skills, including improving the way they give presentations, brainstorming using speech and color coding, as well as some composition as well. So we do have sessions that go into a bit more detail about those.